It has been a while since we have done an episode of Revamped, but I am back at it again and ready to give you some really good, valuable insight about the board game content creation world. And today's episode is potentially, it could be a heated one, but it's not. I don't think it's not what you initially think. I'm not here to, demote or say a specific board game publisher is bad for any reason, because my channel is not about that. It's about uplifting people, and despite the bad in the world, I'm not here to make sure that you know who's bad and who's not. I would like my channel to be as drama-free as possible, because we have enough of that in the world, don't we? So today's episode, today's video, podcast, whatever you are, consuming it in, whether it's in audio form or video form, today's content is all about signs that you should pay attention to and whether or not these are good or bad signs, maybe even some neutral signs of whether or not you should or should not work with a board game publisher. We're going to start off first with the bad signs, so we always end on a good note, because that's how we do things here. Okay, the first sign always starts. We're going to start off in chronological order too, in terms of how you are communicating with the publisher. So let's start off first with the email. If you get an email from a publisher that is pretty much a copy and paste, you can tell it's a copy and paste writer because they never use any content, any specific thing about your channel or about the content that you make in general. It's just a generic message like, hey, fill in your name. We love your content. It would be a great fit for us. What do you think about reviewing this game? Starting from that first line of communication, you should already be wary. I would say if the standard is white, yellow, and red flags being the worst, white flags being kind of neutral, and yellow flags being ones that you should at least be aware of, that is more so a yellow flag, right? If they are copying and pasting a generic message, it tells you a lot of different things as a creator. It tells you that they don't care enough to put in some time and effort to make sure that you are a good fit for them and that they are a good fit for you. B, it also tells you that as a publisher, they're more so cared about just spreading the name or the awareness of their game versus actually matching their games to content creators that are a great fit for them. C, it also tells you that if they aren't willing to put in the work to reach out to you in a specific way, in a way that is inviting on both ends, if they're already not putting in work for that, how is it going to be down the line? That's a really, really good question to ask yourself. How is it going to be down the line if you're already receiving a generic message like this from the get-go? Now, obviously, when I'm pointing this out, it's not black and white. Just because they send you an email that's not specifically tailored to your channel doesn't mean that they're going to be a really bad publisher. No, it just means that you should at least be wary of the communication and the relationship that you are forming going forward. For now, it's just something to be aware of. After a follow-up email, if they are more specific to your brand, if they tell you exactly what they're looking for from the get-go, then of course it probably was a bad impression at first, and it might end up being good later on. At the same time, it could also be a very, very bad indicator of what's to come. So again, just be aware of that first line of communication. Email, avoid copy and paste emails, or if you're going to follow up, make sure that you are very careful and kind of analyze the emails and communication going forward. Now, also along the same lines of communication within the email exchanges, phone exchanges, whatever form of communication that you are talking to them from, if the board game publisher cannot point out a specific work that you've created that they think would match their game, that's also another sign you should be wary of, because have they spent enough time looking at what you do and what you make and whether or not that is going to be a good fit for their game? This is all coming from the perspective of they reaching out to you, of course. You're not necessarily looking for a compliment here. You're not fishing for compliments. You're not necessarily looking for a publisher that is raving about everything that you do, but more so just pointing out a specific video or photo that you've taken that they think would match along their games really well. Now, to also add on to the second sign, if they make it sound like they are giving you, the creator, an opportunity of a lifetime, that's usually a warning sign. If a board game publisher reaches out to you, the creator, and they start out with like, hey, we love your work. We think it would be a great opportunity for you and some exposure for your brand if you cover this game. No, that is a major, major red flag. I'm a very, very strong advocate for creators, as you can tell, but at the same time, I try to always be wary and aware of what the publishers go through as well. So it's a good balance between understanding the creator perspective and the publisher perspective. Obviously, I can only speak from the creator perspective because I am a creator, not a publisher. But when they reach out to you and tell you that, hey, this is an opportunity for you, that's something I really argue against and kind of am not the biggest fan of, because if they were really offering you an opportunity of a lifetime, like they make it sound sometimes, if they're really offering you an opportunity, why couldn't they have made the video or take the photos that they were asking for on their own, right? If it was so easy to create content, if it was so easy to take pictures, why couldn't they have just taken it with their own phones and all that good stuff, right? And add in their own text animations and their own creative style on showing off board games, right? There's a reason why they're reaching out to you, because they need something from you, right? There has to be some kind of exchange that they're looking for. So it's not more so that they are doing you a favor, that they are giving you exposure for their game, but more so that they need content from you, and that's why they're reaching out. So that's why it kind of trailing off a little bit here, but I heard the other day, which by the way, you should definitely check out our Discord channel, Fire and Ice. We have some amazing creator discussions there. Honestly, a big idea of this video stemmed from that discussion, so definitely check it out. Join us there. We're trying to make it a creator hub and a place for just anyone to ask any questions. And again, this video stemmed from that. So with that said, one point that was brought up was, as a creator, I'm worried that publishers won't reach out to me. I'm afraid that the publishers that are going to reach out to me, they won't exactly book me because of what I'm offering. I don't think, and I don't ever encourage creators to put themselves down, because again, it goes back to that point, right? They need something from you. They need content from you. That's why they're reaching out to you. You shouldn't be scared that people won't reach out to you, because then those are the ones that you don't want to attract. A big part as a photographer, as a content creator, is that you want to attract clients that are there for you. Exact same thing as just creating content for your viewers in general, right? You want to attract the viewers that are there for you. It's also one reason why I also changed my brand to Tim Chuon as well, because my videos aren't always about board games, but I want people there that are there just for my personality and just there for me. So the exact same mentality applies to publishers as well. You really shouldn't be afraid that this publisher X, Y, and Z aren't going to reach out to me, or they've reached out to me and they've looked at my packages and they're kind of hesitating because of my pricing or whatever. If they don't value your work for the price that you set, do you want to work with that publisher? And again, I'm not putting down publishers, because at the end of the day, it's a business, right? So you have certain parts and certain investments that you want to make that you think will be mutually beneficial. If it's not going to be beneficial on their end, then of course, it's better off for you to just walk along the same road, but not necessarily, shake hands, if that's a saying. So don't look at it black and white. Don't think that because a publisher doesn't reach out to you or value your work at this price point, at that point in time, doesn't mean that they're bad. It just means that whatever you're offering at that moment isn't a good fit for them at that specific time. So let me drive off these 2 points one last time. The content that you make, the prices that you set as a creator should attract the clients, or will attract the clients actually, that you are gonna want for your channel and for your overall content that you make, whether it's the blog, whether it's photography, whatever it is. Secondly, all the way back home to point number 2, is that publishers should probably point out, it's a really good sign if they are, they should point out specific types of work that you've done that they want their board game to be done as. For example, a lot of times I'll get publishers saying, hey, we really loved your cinematic on this game, or like World of Warcraft Pandemic. That was a really good cinematic. We want a cinematic like that for our game too. That's usually a really good telltale sign that it's going to be a good relationship. On the other hand, if they tell you, hey, we're going to give you an amazing opportunity, we're going to give you one of the first ever copies of this game only here in the US. This is the opportunity of a lifetime, and we're offering you the chance to make content on it first before anyone else. Usually not the best sign for a good relationship with a publisher. Okay, going on to point number 3. If you don't have this as a creator, you should definitely do it now. I'm going to make more videos about this in the future, like lessons learned or just things that you should do as a creator. But to touch on it a little bit now, you should have contracts. If you do not have a contract as a board game content creator, you are having a band-aid fix for something that is not going to be in good fortunes in a good space later on. You need to have a contract as a creator, a contract that outlines what they can expect from you, what you're going to deliver, by what date, and the payment, and all of that good stuff. The contract system that I use is one for photography in general, which is called Dubsado. It's not sponsored by them, but this is just one brand that I use that I've grown to like. It's a little bit of adjustment at first, but in the end, it ends up being a very good streamlined program that I use. So Dubsado, really good for contracts. If you don't have contracts, you need to have one. And the sign for that you should be wary of is if the board game publisher is not willing to sign your contract. Obviously, if there's some hesitation there with your contracts, first off, make sure you didn't write anything that you didn't promise. Like, for example, if you change your prices from the email exchange to the contract, well, okay, I wouldn't sign it either. Again, you should pay attention to what's listed in your contract before being wary of why they aren't signing it in the first place. So far, everyone that I've worked with that has signed the contract has been really good about it. So I have nothing bad to say about that. Just again, be wary of whether or not a publisher is willing to sign your contract. Number 4, a sign of a publisher that you shouldn't be working with. If they ask you to put something in your review, that is a major red flag, obviously, and probably the most obvious sign out of them all. If they are asking you to put something specific in their review, if they're asking for you to like mention specific points that they want you to cover and that they're influencing your review, that's a red flag. This one's easy because I feel like everyone knows it. Publishers shouldn't be telling you what to put in your review because again, it's going to be bad. No one should be telling you what to say about their product because that is just dishonesty, right? Not a good practice. That's an easy one. I have a couple more for you. Now, number 5, if a board game publisher, okay, for this one, you probably won't be working with the publisher to begin with if they already tell you this from the get-go. But if someone tells you that they don't like their video, which has been done to me plenty of times, if someone tells you that they don't like your video or if they don't like a certain review about a game, that's probably a very good sign that you shouldn't be working with them, right? Because they are not open to feedback. Again, it's good to analyze yourself first before critiquing other people. But let's say your review that you put out about a certain game was not communicated in a way that was constructive. Or if you just flat out said, I hated this game is trash, this game just sucked. Well, okay, I wouldn't want you to review my game either, right? Because you hate the game. So if you have nothing good to say about it, why would you want to work with them to begin with? But let's say we're moving on along the gray areas, the neutral zones. Let's say a publisher goes up to you and says, hey, I didn't like what you said about this game. I didn't appreciate all this because actually this was included and that was included and all of this was included. If they are already being defensive or hostile about neutral points that you made or points that you think were really valid in the game in a previous review that you've done, that's probably not a good sign about working with that particular publisher or their line of games. Because if they can't handle your constructive criticism, then in general, I feel like I'm pretty nice when it comes to reviews because, again, I try to understand it from the publisher's standpoint. I always try to see the journey it took for them to get there. So I try to present my points in a way that is more so constructive versus hostile. And then as a side note, people always mention that certain reviewers always have positive things to say about a board game, so it hurts their reliability overall, but then they say something bad about a game that they really like and then they get defensive about it. So, as viewers, it's hard too. Some people want to see critique, some people don't want to see critique. And it's a very hard balance for us as creators to find. For me, I just try to say my honest feedback, whether it's good, whether it's bad, and just take the heat from either sides. But again, if a publisher is hostile about the feedback that you gave in a previous review, if they don't like your work to begin with, it's probably a very strong sign that you should not work with them. Now, a couple more warning signs, and then we'll switch on over to the good stuff. Board game publishers should be asking about payment and how you accept payment. For me, I always do it through PayPal, and typically before, I always had payment set up after content was delivered. I'm not doing that going forward at all. There's a reason for that. I'll come back to it. But publishers should be asking you about your form of communication before, or at least in the middle of all of your email exchanges before you start working on your content. Every single time a publisher has asked about that, it has been an amazing, amazing experience from the beginning all the way till the end. Every single publisher that was not in like a good space with me, or just we didn't really vibe well, or we didn't really work together well, if you want to be more professional about it. Every single one of those exchanges never involved them asking for payment. Going forward, I'm actually going to be taking a deposit in order to reserve dates because things are just so packed and so full. And if a publisher is kind of hesitant about working with you to begin with, it's hard because then you set aside time for them and then they don't end up working with you. And it's like, well, now I have this space allotted for your game, and then now you don't want to do it anymore. So that's tough on me. So for me going forward, I'm taking deposit just like I do with my photography outside of the board gaming space. And on top of that, I'm probably going to end up taking full payment before the project is even completed because I've had just way too many incidences with publishers not paying for months on end. It has been insane. This has to be the ultimate red flag. It's publishers not communicating with you about payment. It's publishers not paying you, obviously. It's also publishers that aren't communicating well when it comes down to payment. So this is a really big deal. When you go to a grocery store, you load up the cart with chips and drinks and all that good stuff and vegetables, steak, whatever you consume on a daily basis. You load up your cart with goods that you're going to buy. Do you walk out of the store handing them an IOU, or do you just walk out of the store without paying at all? You never do that, right? You always end up checking out with a cashier because you're paying for the stuff that you are buying, that you are going to be consuming. I don't know why that consensus doesn't occur with content creation. There have been a surprising number of instances, specifically for the board game industry, because again, I do content outside of the board gaming space as well. I've never had trouble with it until it came to the board games. I don't know what it is. I genuinely don't know what it is. There are publishers that will, we make a plan, we have communication, everything's just solid from the beginning to the middle, and then we get to the end and we get to payment and it just becomes a hassle because to begin with, money is just awkward to talk about, and I don't like talking about money. I just want to make stuff and then be compensated fairly for it, for the prices that is set from the very beginning, from prices that I have set in my contract that's due when the content is delivered, and then we get to payment and it just becomes a fiasco for too many publishers to name. Again, I'm not going to name any specifically, but I feel like there are a lot of bad things wrong with it aside from publishers not paying you on time. I feel like it's a sign of major disrespect because sometimes, for example, if you have really big shoots and you have more than one person involved, sometimes if you have very big shoots, if you have very big events like a wedding, for instance, there are things that you have to pay for as a photographer out of your own pocket. So when you have a team involved in all of that and the person that is paying for your service doesn't pay on time, what are you going to do with the rest of your team, with the rest of the gear that you rented out, the space that you rented? There's so much stuff involved going into the shoot. And when publishers don't pay on time, now it looks bad on you, right? So all of that falls back on you because then the team looks to you and whoever you're working with looks up to you for payment. I'll be honest, I really don't like that because it's not always about, the money, the lump sum. It's more so about the timing and how much that they care about getting you compensated fairly on time. The same idea, right? If you go to work and you have a paycheck that comes out on Fridays every 2 weeks, what if on a certain Friday, your company, the corporate you're working for tells you, hey, we don't have it today? Would you be upset? Probably, right? Because you have to put food on the table. You have people depending on you. You have family. You have so many things to take care of. But for whatever reason, in the board gaming space, that idea, almost that sign of respect is just gone. Now, on a better note, I will say that 70% of the publishers that I have worked with have been amazing about it. If they can't have a certain payment on a specific date that we agreed on, they'll communicate with me. And that I appreciate a lot more than just kind of stringing you along or not communicating with you or just not talking to you in general about what is the issue. Maybe there's something wrong with accounting and then they'll tell me and then that's no problem at all. I just need to know so I can make plans ahead of time for my own family, life, career, everything else involved to get the content that you were looking for to begin with. Something that you and I have both agreed upon, something that you and I have both signed a contract on, and something that just you and I initially had respect for. Again, it's like going to a grocery store, right? You don't walk out with all the produce and stuff unpaid for, or you don't give a cashier an IOU, right? You don't say, I'm going to pay next week or the week after. No, you pay then and there. And I feel like that process should definitely be streamlined a lot more in the board game industry. So warning sign number 6, 7, whichever one that we're on now, definitely pay attention to the method of payment that you have both communicated on. If payment is something that they have mentioned to you already beforehand, before you even bring it up, great. That is a great, great sign. If not, you should be very, very wary of that. It should be a yellow, red flag if they're not talking about payment to begin with. Sometimes also different companies will have tax forms and everything. So usually those are filled out beforehand. So again, just some things to be aware of. Definitely make sure you pay attention to that the next time you are working with a publisher for things that are paid. Okay, the last and final warning sign, and then we'll get to the good side of today's podcast, or at least the signs I want to talk about more. The last warning sign I have for you is the way they handle constructive criticism. There is a way to go about constructive criticism because it's not easy to take it. For me, it is. But in general, I feel like constructive criticism is not easy to take, but I'm used to it coming from a science background. So that makes it easier, at least for me personally. But constructive criticism, when they give it to you, which they most likely will, there is a way to go about it. For example, I have publishers say, hey, Tim, I don't think the logo, the way you animated it like this was a good fit. Can you do something else, or can you make it more subtle? That is a clean and fair point. Maybe I made it way too animated and overly stylized for a board game that was more so family friendly and didn't need all those extra glitchy animations or whatever I'm working on, right? So that's fair because ultimately that is their logo and we are representing their brand by making content for them. So when it comes to criticism like that, I appreciate it because again, I'm representing their brand and we're a team, right? We're working with this together and I want feedback that is helpful like that. But if another person comes up to me and says, this sucks, which I've had done before, by the way, like this is, I'm trying very hard not to use precise words here because it's going to make me upset again. What you did was trash. There's no point of even having this. If I even knew that you made this kind of content to begin with, I wouldn't have even bothered working with you. That's not helpful on either end. Why would you go out and say stuff like that in email form? I would love for them to say in, direct contact because people don't do that. People don't go up to you and say stuff like that to you. That's just weird, right? And to hear that in text form behind a keyboard is not okay because it's not helpful on either side. Because one, when they say that to you, for whatever reason, they just want to feel empowered over you. There is really no reason at all for a publisher to go up to you and say that to you unless they want to feel empowered for some reason, or if they just want to feel in control, or if they are just out to do harm because, again, it's not beneficial for you as a creator. It's not beneficial for them, really, other than to feel good for them, I guess. Okay, so that is my final warning sign. Make sure you pay attention to how they are giving you constructive criticism. So we reached from the beginning, from the email exchange to you delivering content, and we've covered all sorts of signs from the beginning, middle to end. If you reach the end and they are giving feedback like that, may not be a good sign for you to work with them on a second project or a third or anything at all in the future. But anyways, let's go and switch on over to the good stuff. Okay, so pretty much all the good stuff is all the bad stuff that I mentioned reversed, right? So starting with email communication, if they already rave about your work, if they are genuinely nice people, if they just tell you from the get-go, hey, we really liked this social media promo that you made for Tiny Ninjas. Can you make something like that? Can you make something like that for us? That's already a good sign because A, they pointed out the work that they are interested in. B, they've also told you which one specifically. They've also told you, C, they've also gave you clear direction. We want a video just like this. That is already a good sign. Number two, they already have their own contract. That's usually a good sign too. If a company already has their own contract to begin with, that usually means that they are more organized, they are more structured, and they kind of understand the process of this whole exchange that's happening. Now, that's not to say that companies that don't use contracts aren't good to work with, because there are actually a couple that I work with that I don't use contracts at all because we've already established that relationship from the beginning. But it does show good signs that they are organized, that they're structured, that they have that they're experienced in the field. Number three, probably one of the best signs you can ever look for when working with a publisher. If you said something bad about their game and they don't mind it, and they ask you to review another game of theirs or work with them on another game, despite all the bad stuff that you said, that's usually a very, very good sign. It means that they can handle feedback and that they're just interested in what you have to say. There you go. Honestly, it's even better if they laugh it off, or maybe they'll even admit this and say hey, we're actually having a second version of the game. We're going to cover and address all those points. Thank you for bringing that up. That's a really, really good sign of someone that you should really work on cherishing, having that really good relationship and kind of forming that bond, because then it just means that they appreciate your thoughts and they appreciate the work that you put in for their game. Again, flipping the coin to the other side, if they already ask you about payment beforehand, which I've had for many, many publishers as well, all the good ones, if they've already asked you about payment beforehand and ask you what your process is, when your deposit is due, if they can reserve a date with you, all these signs that point towards when can we pay you, those are very good signs of a great, great board game publisher. Now, I didn't mention anyone on the other side in terms of publishers you shouldn't work with, but I am going to rave about a couple of publishers that you should work with because they have been amazing for me and I have no problem promoting them because they have been really good to work with. Number one, probably the most obvious one, Stonemaier Games. Jamie, Alex from Stonemaier that I've worked with very closely have been absolutely amazing. When it comes down to payment to begin with, Jamie pays it like instantly. And there's so much respect there. I feel like there's so much class there because he even pays stuff before everything's like fully delivered, which is really a sign of trust to begin with. And I really appreciate that. So again, Jamie, if you're listening to this, you're probably not. But if you are, thank you for that. I really do appreciate it. On top of that, Stonemaier Games has given me a ton of creativity, flexibility. And moving on to my next point, actually, they give you, a sign of a good board game publisher is that they give you ample time to finish whatever you guys agreed upon. If it was a review, if it was a certain photo project, for example, Stonemaier Games, again, they'll send me copies. I think Tapestry, if we can talk about it now, I think we can. But Tapestry, for instance, they sent out 2 to 3 months ahead of time, which was way, way more time than I needed. And sometimes I'm even reaching the deadline because I've just pushed it off for quite some time working on other things. But sometimes I'm even reaching the deadline and they'll give me a quick reminder or just ask about it really, really nicely. And it has been amazing because, again, they give a lot of time for you to work on your stuff. If you still can't have it by that time, then that's on you. That's definitely on you if you can't finish it on time. Another great sign, number 5 or 6 now, if they give you feedback that motivates you to create more things for them or just to make things that much tighter, fine-tune a video, fine-tune different photos, if they give you really good feedback that is honest, that is constructive, and that is also helpful, that is also a sign of a great board game publisher. Another example, Orange Nebula. They have been amazing to work with as well. I worked on a recent commercial with them and we went back and forth about the logo. It wasn't necessarily what I mentioned earlier about the logo, but we went back and forth about the logo and different parts of the video. And everything that they mentioned about it, I agreed 100% wholeheartedly. So again, it just made that video that much better. Z-Man Games, I worked on the World of Warcraft Pandemic video, and for one of the parts I put in different sound effects for like the zombies, and I agree with them because they mentioned that can we take off this sound effect, because they didn't even mention because they just like asked can we take off the sound effect, and then after looking back at it and revisiting those scenes, I actually agree. I didn't want these sound effects of the alternate zombies. Instead, I would have really liked having the actual World of Warcraft zombies in there. The actual undead mob would have been great to have from the game, but again, that would have caused copyright issues, but I 100% agree with them, and again, that is constructive feedback. Now, the final one I want to end with today, the final tip or sign that you should definitely work with this particular publisher. Just because publishers have a big reputation, just because you've seen their games everywhere or they have really big titles, that doesn't necessarily mean that you should work with them. More so, what you should pay attention to, not necessarily their titles, not necessarily their branding and their overall production quality and how many games that they have out in the world and how many times you hear about them. What you should pay attention to more though is that they go out of their way in order to make sure that you have what you need and that, again, you have ample time to fulfill their requests. And honestly, that exchange, those characteristics will come up very, very early in your communication with them. If they give you everything that you need, if they go out of the way to do priority shipping, if they ask about your time frames, and they just are very, very caring about you as a person, as a creator, that's honestly such a good sign for them being amazing publishers to work with. Example, case in point, is with Hot Banana Games. They recently had a Kickstarter on Steam. You might have seen my video on that as well, or photos, but they were amazing to work with. Honestly, I was a hassle, I feel like, more so in the beginning because I was in the middle of transitioning from the old studio to the new studio. I needed more time. And from the very beginning, they were so open with it and very, very understanding. Even if I was myself, that's definitely my fault. I was late on certain deadlines. Even if after I asked for it, they were months ahead of time in terms of how much time that they gave me, and they gave me way more time needed, which is why I actually went the extra mile to produce even more for them and really put in my blood, sweat, and tears for that campaign. So Hot Banana Games, if you're listening, you are one amazing publisher to work with. And also, I'm very excited to play Steam Up as well. I did play Steam Up initially, the prototype version, but I can't wait for the final copy to play with my parents and my family too. But anyways, those are just some amazing publishers that I have had an amazing experience with. Again, I want to end on a good note. So Z-Man Games, Stonemaier, Orange Nebula, Hot Banana Games, just some that come off the top of my head. They have been incredible to work with. And yeah, so those are warning signs and good signs, for lack of a better term, that you should or should not, that you shouldn't or should work with a board game publisher, respectfully. You know, the order that I meant those words in. But anyways, I hope you found this video helpful. This video is intended for not just new creators, but definitely for any creator that is interested in just working with a publisher for reviews, for monetary compensation, just anything at all. Once you have that board game content creator and publisher relationship, this video is for you. So we found this video, this podcast helpful. Please subscribe if you aren't already to the channel, and also leave me a review on Revamped. I'd really appreciate it. We are cranking things up back again slowly but steadily once we finish up this series on a new style of board game photography. So I'm excited to share some more insight about content creation to begin with. Yeah, thanks for being here, and I'll see you all in the next episode of Revamped.